At the dawn of time, long before breakfast, when the world had just begun to spin, and the only sound was a general MIDI version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and with only 3 flavors of crisp to choose from, there stood a boy. Not just any boy. A boy with a gift. In the form of an IOU. No, not just any old boy. A small plastic boy called Richard. It's just a normal Sunday, and Richard number 1 is voyaging to Mars just to get a bit of space from Richard number 4. Richard number 4 is insisting on changing his name to Ventraflux Fantabixel Fluselbag Esquire. It's all a bit much for Richard number 1, who's heard there is a lifetime supply of malt loaf on Mars. He recently bought the exclusive access rights from a Disney prince he met online. He is going to make the 34-million-mile journey inside a powerful old sock. He's decided against a white leisure sock in favor of a black business sock, which has clearly seen a lot of action. It does, however, have some fetching multicolour accents around the ankle and toes that appeals to Richard's smart Kaz self-image. Malt loaf is a prized delicacy where Richard is from, and he likes it toasted with some butter and served on his favourite blue plate. If there are no toasters on Mars, he's going to lose his actual mind. The weather forecast for the rest of the day is fine, so Richard packs the sock and blasts off. Feeling the effects of G-force all over his face, he takes a silly selfie before watching the Earth shrink to the size of a marble in his rearview mirror. Richard arrives at the red planet in record time, thanks to the sock's ability to make the jump to hyperspace. From behind an orangey red rock, Richard number 4 appears and welcomes him to the planet with another cup of avgolemoni. Without thinking, Richard says, "Thanks," and takes a swig. After quite a delayed reaction, he spits out his drink in surprise. He then nearly coughs up a lung in further surprise as he watches the liquid shoot for over 100 meters under Mars' considerably weaker gravity. This makes Richard number 4 fall about laughing. Richard number 1 can't help but find his presence on Mars suspicious, to say the least. After making some thinly veiled excuses about being late for a meeting, Richard number 4 disappears back the way he came, leaving Richard number 1 gazing at the cosmic vista before him. Richard number 1 was relieved, as he'd been very careful not to mention malt loaf the whole time, and victory was feeling tantalizingly close. After a few hours of exploration across the Martian surface, Richard number 1 was starting to get very hungry and rather despondent. He thought there was something fishy about the situation, and as he replayed events in his mind, he realized there were a number of obvious red flags. But just as Richard summited the crest of yet another Martian hill, he looked down and saw it. A sweet, brown, malty mountain. The mother lode. A lifetime supply of malt loaf. He dropped to his knees and allowed the moment of pure ecstasy to wash over him. This must be what it really feels like to be a go-getter, he thought, as he collected himself and charged towards the perfect squidgy snack. Still, as he neared the malty mountain, something didn't quite seem right. It must have been the white paper background that finally gave it away. The vision of paradise in front of him was really just an impressively accurate drawing, planted by Richard number 4. He'd been had. Richard number 4 was the Disney prince all along. Now it all made sense. Richard number 1 had forked out $1, the entire contents of his piggy bank. He'd been so comprehensively fleeced that he nearly wanted to vomit. Meanwhile, thanks to a series of wise investments, Richard number 4 had taken that dollar and created a space travel empire spanning the known galaxy. Looking on the bright side, and being a glass half full kind of guy, Richard number 1 knew he'd at least be able to hitch a ride back to Earth. Oh well. The two cousins proceeded to share a commercial flight back to Earth. They both enjoyed their free tomato juice and peanuts. And Richard number 1 was pestered constantly by Richard number 2 for the whole duration, as if nothing had ever happened.